If you were ordering equipment, a booth, for example, a new booth, then this is something that you would want to get on way ahead of time. Because unlike an audiometer or a tympanometer or any other piece of equipment, the booth takes a lot of time to get. The fastest you'll ever get a booth is 90 days. It could very easily be 120 days or more, depending on what make and model booth it is. Because there is no factory in North America that has a warehouse that is just full of these things, just waiting for your order to come in, and then they're going to send a forklift to pick yours up and put it on a truck for you so you can have it next week. Oh no, it's going to be manufactured after it's ordered. And so it's going to take time to manufacture it from scratch, and also, well, not totally from scratch, certain things are pre-made, but also to have it shipped. And sometimes there's big orders ahead of yours. VA hospitals that have ordered, $500,000 worth of sound booth, and that order has to be filled in a particular time frame, and nothing's going on that assembly line until that's done, including yours. So the situation is such. It's something that you have to know, and most people don't know, and they go, I had no idea it took so long. We're opening the practice the first of next month. It won't be a booth. Okay, so what do we have to consider when we're talking about a booth? It's either going to be a audiometric test booth, that's a patient exam room, like you have here in your clinic downstairs, or it's going to be a audiometric test suite. A suite is two rooms that are next to each other. One of them is for the patient, that's the exam room, and the one next to it is for the audiologist, that's the control room. So it's a control room and an exam room put together. I'll show you some pictures of these. That's very popular in universities, big hospitals, certainly VA hospitals. If you went to the VA in Atlanta, you would see several rows of these. They're all suites. And one side is for the audiologist, the other side is for the patient. In any booth or suite, you have to consider, is it double-walled? You have two of your booths downstairs are double-walled, or is it single-walled? That will make a big difference in how much noise reduction there is. And then, are you going to acquire this new or used? Right? Well, most of the time it's new, because when it's new, it's good. It's known quality of noise reduction, and it is it is designed the way that you want it. The location of the window, the location of the door swing, so that it accommodates the room that you're going to put it in, and that you have good patient access. Patient can easily get in. It's good to have as straight as possible patient access. But there are also as a market for used booths. That's a little bit more difficult because they're not as easily found as you might think. I had a doctor once who said, I'm going to get a used booth. Something like that I can do, because unlike the equipment, which goes obsolete, just like a computer would go obsolete within a certain amount of time, the booth is not something that's going to go obsolete and be replaced by a newer model. And that's true. So he thought, he said, can I come to your place and look at them? What he had envisioned in his mind is that where we're located in Stone Mountain, Georgia, that we had a warehouse, and a warehouse was just full of used booths of every configuration and model, and they were all assembled so that he can walk down the aisle and view them, walk inside of them, and look at them and say, I'll take that one. Okay. Now, such a thing doesn't exist anywhere in this world, but that was his vision. He thought it did. And I said, no, Doc, It's not happening. In fact, the best we could do is if you give me the specifications on the room that you're going to put it in, so I can decide what's going to fit in there. We'll try to find something. And it's difficult because most people, even if you bought a booth of a particular size and configuration, and your practice grew to the point where you really needed a bigger space, well, you would have that booth disassembled and then moved to your new location and reassembled. You wouldn't necessarily buy a new one. So since these things don't readily wear out, the booths that you have downstairs, all of them are over 20 years old, then certainly you can move it and reinstall it. So they're just not that easy to find and then find to be the right size that you need. You'll have to consider the cost. Right? I'll tell you something about that. The installation site, what would best be accommodated in the space that you have. If you're designing a space, what would be the best design for the booth that you want? And as I said, the lead time, at least 90, very often 120 days, and even more. And as far as the cost of the booth or the suite or whatever it is, you also have to add to that the cost of shipping. And this booth can very well weigh at least 6,000 pounds. So shipping costs are significant. And also installation. Installation takes a crew of nice, big, strong guys with lots of experience at doing this. And that's significant as well, right? So a lot of things to consider that most audiologists are not familiar with. These are the different manufacturers of booths in North America. As you notice, there's only 3 of them, and IAC went out of business. They were the largest manufacturer of audiometric test booths in the world. They were in Bronx. They're in the Bronx. And because when I lived in New Jersey across the George Washington Bridge, I used to go over there just to pick up things that we needed. Well, IAC is no longer there. So the 2 that are used most often, there is a third smaller one. I can't remember what the name is. But is Acoustic Systems, they're in Austin, Texas, and Eckel, which is in Canada, right? Acoustic Systems and Eckel. IAC is, the company that bought what was left of IAC might be called Noise Barriers, but I'm not familiar with them. The 2 largest are those. So, look at this. This is a triangular shaped single-walled booth, door and window on the same wall. That's unusual. Most booths are either square or rectangular and not triangular like that. If you wanted to put it in a corner, that might be a good idea, but that's very unusual. Very unusual. And it might be good for accommodating your space, but it is not good for patient testing. The more square it is, the better it is for patient testing, for the positioning of sound field speakers and VRA, right? Visual response audiometry. There are smaller ones like this. If you were seeing only adult patients and you didn't care about sound field or VRA, you might go for something like this. A typical booth like this is just one person in there at a time, one adult sitting, and that's about 4 feet square inside. That's very common in offices that see adults only. What you're more used to and more common in audiology is something like this. This is the most common single-walled booth. It's got a window and door on either the same side or the window could be on one of the other sides. And it is about 6 by 6 inside, could be 7 by 7, 8 by 8, any size that you wanted. And it's single-walled. I'm going to give you a brochure. Just pass these back. The most popular booths for a single private audiology practice would be like this. a single-walled booth that's about 6 by 6, very typical. It's the most desirable booth, single-wall booth, 6 by 6 inside, approximate dimensions. If you look at the back of this brochure that I just passed around, you see that in RE142MC, MC means multi-configuration, and so you can see some of the configurations with door and window on the same wall, or that window moved to another wall, one of the left or right walls. And if you are going to decide on the configuration, you always want the door to open away from the window. Open the door away from the window. So you need to specify it's a right-hand door or a left-hand door. And that's specified by where the hinges are. When you're pulling the door out towards you, are the hinges on the right or the left? Because you want it to open away from the window. Otherwise, as you go back and forth in and out of the booth to deal with the patient, you've got to walk around the door. It's not as convenient as the door opening away from the window. Another thing that you'll notice on these two models on this brochure, down at the bottom, you'll notice RE142MC. You see the inside dimensions, approximately 6 by 6 feet inside, and outside it's approximately 7 by 7. Okay, so when somebody says, "Oh, I want a 6 by 6 single wall booth, door and window on the same wall, door on the right, window on the left," we would know exactly what they're talking about. That would be the most common thing. Notice there's a smaller one, that RE146MC. That's approximately 6 by 4 inside and 7 by 5 outside. And so if you had a smaller room, that would be okay, but I'd much rather have the bigger one just for the ability to configure the speakers for sound field and the VRAs in there, and maybe do tympanometry inside instead of outside, and things like that. If I'm going to have somebody in there with the patient, like a pediatric patient where the parent is in there or an assistant, I need a little bit more room. So we only use that one that's 6 by 4 inside when we have a really tight space and the other one won't fit. Now you basically, and this is single wall because it's a single 4-inch wall all the way around. And these things have floors, as you know, you have to step up. The floors are about 5 inches thick. So these plug into a regular 110 volt electrical outlet, and they have a ventilation system that draws air in from the surrounding room, which should be adequately air conditioned. How much? Now, if my wife Jan, who does all the quoting of prices for Med-Acoustics, if she was here, she would go, "Don't listen to him," because she knows all the prices and has all the information to come up with that. I'm just going to tell you round numbers. That very popular booth, the RE142MC, the most popular booth in a private practice, whether it's a private practice audiologist or private practice ENT, where you find double wall booths and suites, are typically in a university setting or a hospital setting, in particular VA hospital, things like that. So this booth would cost you approximately, again, I'm just giving you round figures. I don't know the exact prices off the top of my head, and actually they change. But it's approximately $17,000, approximately $2,500 to ship, and approximately $3,200 to install. So you see, it gets a little expensive right away, and all I got was the booth. Okay. There's another thing you might notice. If you look at the front of this is the front of the brochure. One more thing I want to show you on the brochure. You see down at the bottom some specifications, and one of them is noise reduction. And notice that you have some octave bands listed from 125 hertz through 8,000 hertz. And under that you have the noise reduction. And you know that the main components of speech are 500 through 4,000. And right in the middle of that is 1,000 and 2,000. And notice that the average noise reduction at 1,000 and 2,000 hertz is about 55 dB, right? So that means it's not soundproof. If you are speaking at normal conversational speech, like I am right now, about 70 dB, then a patient with normal hearing will hear through the booth, okay? So you have to be careful and know that. And every audiologist that uses a single wall booth realizes that, and so they have to keep from making a lot of noise outside the booth and speak softly and realize. Now, of course, the patient is wearing headphones or insert phones. That helps attenuate and reduce ambient noise. But sometimes you're testing without those, like when you're doing bone conduction, you only have one of them in, or sound field testing, where you don't have anything like that, right? So you have to know how much noise is there going to be in my environment, know the noise reduction, and see if you can achieve ANSI specifications. In other words, what's the maximum noise level that you can have in the booth for clinical testing, like bone conduction, for example. These are specified by the ANSI, it's American Institute, the Institute of Standards, right? And so what are the standards for background noise for sound field testing, bone conduction testing, air conduction testing? Can I make my environment quiet enough with a single wall booth? And basically, in most private practices, yes. You don't put the booth right next to the children's waiting room, right? Where you're going to have all the noise. You put it in the back of the practice, kind of away from things, where it's relatively quiet. And we always tell people that are building a practice, naturally we specify the size of the room, where the door is, how it opens, good patient access and all this. Do we need a ramp? Do we have to meet ADA requirements, right? That's Americans with Disabilities Act, okay? Then they're going to have a ramp to get in because they'll be able to accommodate wheelchairs. Well, a ramp is always an option. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. Right? Make sense? A lot to it, a lot more than you thought to it, probably. Yeah. Okay. So this is a very typical single wall booth. And how about this? Here's a university setting where we have suites. A separate room for the patient, a separate room for the operator. It's a kind of ideal situation. Here's a double-walled construction. Instead of just a single 4-inch wide wall, a double-wall construction has a 4-inch wide wall. There's a 4-inch airspace, and then another 4-inch wide wall. And of course, there's two doors, one that opens out, one that opens in, double-wall booth. If you look at the booths down, the two that you use the most downstairs, on the left side of the hall, they're double-walled booths. Right? You see, here's a ramp, but that ramp doesn't meet ADA requirements because ADA requires for every inch of elevation, you need 1 foot of ramp length. So if you're going up 6 inches, then you need a 6-foot ramp. If you have to meet ADA requirements, a lot of times that depends on the building inspector. Some of them are more lenient, and some of them are stricter than others. And of course, booths, every booth is shipped in pieces. These are panels. That 6x6 booth, approximately 6 feet by 6 feet inside, that RE142MC, that weighs almost, so it's 5,800 pounds, almost 5,800 pounds. So you can imagine every one of these panels that it comes in is several hundred pounds. We have a we have a contractor that does these installations. My son and I used to do them with a bunch of guys ourselves. Well, at some point I said, I am way too old for this, and we trained a contractor, a construction contractor, to do it. Now that contractor, called Hearing Booth Solutions, or Sound Booth Solutions, is the largest contractor of that type in the country, if not the world.